So, whatever happened to that super cool submarine, the Nautilus from Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Oh man, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, one of those films that, as a kid, certainly not only inspired my imagination and love for movies in general, but also scared the crap out of me with that giant freaking squid attacking the sub. I seriously don't think I got into a bathtub for about 4 months after watching that, and what cooler part of this incredible film, I mean, other than the giant squid, obviously, was the submarine, the Nautilus, certainly one of my favorite childhood Disney movie magic memories. So grab your squid-killing harpoon and your favorite deep-sea diving helmet with a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in. Stand by engines, collision speed full. Okay, I gotta tell you guys right off the bat that this subject is an enormous one with a lot of details to get to, and this video might run a little bit longer than my normal ones, but I do promise to get everybody right to the end of the video in good, healthy shape, hopefully without any squid attacks. Enormous thanks to Tony Hardy, James Small, and Michael Sove for supplying a ton of great information and photos that I now get to share with all of you guys. Now, for those of you who have never seen 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, this film was a Walt Disney Studios production that was released by Buena Vista Distribution in December of 1954 in CinemaScope, directed by Richard Fleischer, starring Kirk Douglas, James Mason, Paul Lucas, and Peter Lorre, based on the 1870 novel by Jules Verne about a ship sent to investigate a wave of mysterious sinkings where the crew eventually encounters an incredible submarine, the Nautilus, commanded by the genius yet slightly unhinged Captain Nemo. A little bit of background history on the film. In the early 1950s, Walt Disney himself was a super busy guy with a ton of different projects, including TV, his True Life Adventure series, live-action movies, obviously his animated shorts and features, but the most important thing he did during that period was to make the decision to build Disneyland. Interesting tidbit, originally Walt Disney wanted to call the park Mickey Mouse Land and also toyed with the name of Dislandia, but eventually decided on simply Disneyland, and thank goodness for that. Yup. There were a ton of very talented people on Disney's staff, and many more were recruited to design and plan the park, one of them being a designer named Harper Goff, who was hired initially to work on art direction for the upcoming Disney park. And this is super cool. Harper Goff designed Main Street Disneyland after the look of his own hometown, Fort Collins, Colorado. Harper Goff just loved the original version of this film as a kid, and after being asked by Walt Disney himself to work on some undersea footage and storyboards for the True Life Adventure series The Living Seas, and the fact that MGM had sold the rights to this story, it was just pure luck that Mr. Disney purchased the rights for the story in 1951, and Harper Goff had his chance to help make movie history. Now, in the spring of 1952, preparation was underway for a full-length animated feature version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Yes, animated. Harper Goff was, at the time, working at Disney on the Jungle Cruise as art director, but was given the assignment to design the fantastic submarine, the Nautilus, the incredible mechanical marvel that he truly felt is what would set this film apart from other underwater adventures from the time. Even though the story was set in the mid-19th century, the Nautilus submarine had to do things that were impossible for modern submarines at the time, like traveling at tremendous speeds, the ability to ram other ships without taking on very much damage, and even cooler, to have a design that had the outward appearance of a sea monster. However, in the fall of 1952, after several months of preliminary work, Disney decided to scrap the whole idea of an animated feature and go instead with a live-action film, which I guess made sense. His other British-produced live-action movies like Treasure Island, Robin Hood, and Rob Roy did really well at the box office, and they were way less expensive and time-consuming than to make a full-length animated feature. Now, because Walt Disney Studios was primarily an animation studio, they recruited a bunch of artists and designers from other studios, like Universal, 20th Century Fox, and Warner Brothers, which is where Harper Goff previously worked. This guy not only designed the Nautilus, but also the Proteus submarine for Fantastic Voyage in 1966, and a bunch of props for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in 1971. Remember the Wonkavator? And a ton of other stuff. We could literally do an entire video just on this guy, which, come to think of it, might not be a bad idea in the future. Stay tuned. It's really very fascinating to acknowledge the fact that this film was not only one of the very first films to be shot completely in CinemaScope, but also the first film ever to be completely storyboarded from the start to the end, which is something that just seems second nature in Hollywood today. But think about it. What was Disney Studios currently filled with? Animators, artists. So yeah, drawing storyboards for an entire feature was pretty much right up their alley. The incredible interior sets of the Nautilus were built for about $200,000 out of the initial budget of $4.5 million and were constructed primarily of wood, plywood, plaster, masonite, and fiberglass. Now here's a little piece of Hollywood secrecy that'll change the way you watch this film. The organ pipes on Nemo's elaborately gorgeous organ were made from plaster. Filming for 20,000 Leagues began in Jamaica in January 1954, with diving footage being shot in the Caribbean and miniature footage being filmed at the same time back in the U.S. Christopher Mueller and Robert Matty were the guys primarily responsible for the execution of the two monster squids. Yes, there were two squids, but hang on, we'll get to that. This is awesome. Chris Mueller was the guy who actually sculpted the creature from the Black Lagoon for Universal Studios the same year, in 1954, and Robert Matty designed Bruce, the 25-foot great white shark, 20 years later for the original Jaws. Now, keep in mind, the squid was really nothing more than a giant puppet on wires being controlled by off-camera puppeteers and stagehands. Really an incredible cinematic achievement when you come to think about it, under the supervision of Chris Mueller, even though it didn't really work out all that well the first time they went to actually film this sequence. Now, to say that the filming of the squid scene was a bit of a disaster would certainly be an understatement. The tentacles would literally deteriorate right before their eyes due to the fact that the monster was made primarily of very early foam, not to mention the enormous hot stage lights required for filming in CinemaScope. Big chunks of the beast would just fall right off in the middle of a shot. So what the heck do you do? Well, you just grab some glue and stick 'em back on. After filming this scene with the monster squid, which was shot on a very calm sea set with a beautiful sunset backdrop, Walt Disney reviewed the dailies and, well, basically he felt the footage just looked terrible, which is why they eventually decided to reshoot the entire squid scene again at a later time with a second squid, now under the supervision of Robert Matty, in the middle of a torrential, full-scale rainstorm. Pretty brilliant, considering that the rain would not only hide any of the special effect wires on set, but it also made it a lot more exciting to have Captain Nemo fighting not only the squid, but the elements utilizing a system of pneumatic vacuum with air pressure and springs to make the 20-foot tentacles move, a system that had never been used for this kind of an effect before, and costing Disney an additional $250,000, pushing up the now escalating $4.5 million budget. During this second and successful refilming of the squid scene, Walt Disney brilliantly and strategically set up bleachers on the side of Studio 3 and invited the press and his investors. And oh man, did the media show up in droves, writing incredible stories about the amazing Walt Disney filming giant sequences of monsters and submarines. Believe me, it really helped push this movie right over the top. Oh yeah, one last super cool tidbit about the squid from our Hollywood gossip column. James Mason himself discreetly nicknamed the squid Zsa Zsa after the actress Zsa Zsa Gabor, who frequently dated and, like the squid, was known as a hands-on lover. Okay. The Nautilus. Originally, Walt Disney wanted a very sleek-looking design based on the metal tube used for a Bering cigar, but let's just say that Harper Goff politely disagreed and, over the 1953 Labor Day weekend, created a prototype miniature of the Nautilus, seen here with Mr. Walt Disney himself, even though this was just a prototype and not used in the production of the film.
One of the prime points made by Verne in the original story was that most of the people of the world that had seen it described it as a monster, as a sea monster. The two most awesome sea creatures that I had ever seen were the shark and the alligator. And then the shark with its dorsal fin, which you see is a warning. It's like the rattle on a rattlesnake. So I kind of combined the two.
Now, there were two different models of the Nautilus used during the filming of 20,000 Leagues, an 11-foot hero model and an even larger 22-foot version that we'll get to in just a second. The first miniature sequence to be shot were the underwater scenes of the 11-foot Nautilus, which took 3 months to build, by the way, powered by 5 car batteries for the lighting and the electric motor to turn the propeller. Absolutely incredible when fully rigged with batteries. This boat weighed approximately 600 pounds. It was so well built, it could be filmed underwater or hung from a rig by wires, known at the time in Hollywood as the Lydecker rig, for what was called dry for wet techniques, or anything needing motion, really, in any environment. The Lydecker rig was used constantly throughout the film, but the only time it was used as a dry for wet shot was when the Nautilus was traveling through the tunnel at Vulcania. Now, for the shots of the Nautilus running along the surface of the water, a huge 22-foot-long model of the submarine was created. Yes, 22 feet long, which was attached to a mounted wheeled dolly and pulled by a cable from a half-ton truck. This monstrous model was surrounded with green, high-powered lights just below the waterline, which gave you that super cool visual effect of the phosphorescent glow in the night shots. And there were even 2 water cannons attached to the front of the ship to create an artificial wake and bubbles in front of the Nautilus when operating at collision speed full. Along with the miniature submarines, they also made a live-action mock-up of the top deck set for the actors to be filmed throughout the course of the production, and of course, battling the monster squid, along with 2 different full-size skiffs, one made of wood, skinned with metal, and the other made of fiberglass, each to be used in different scenes of the film. This is really interesting and certainly a very creative way to film a miniature model, but apparently one of the models of the Nautilus created was horizontally squeezed front to back, basically squished, meaning that when the squished model was filmed with a standard 35mm lens, but played back on a CinemaScope projector, the model would look completely normal. This particular anamorphic model was used only for screen tests and never actually used for any of the final shots in the film. This is great. Check out this photo of the very first public appearance of the 11-foot Nautilus in early 1955 at Marineland of the Pacific. Okay, but where is all this super cool stuff from the film today? Well, surprisingly, it's not all bad news. The enormous 22-foot-long submarine was still around at the Disney Ranch in the late 50s, early 60s, and some fans even claim that they not only saw it there, but possibly even made arrangements to own it. But rumor and legend would most likely have us believe that it sadly was just burned in a giant trash heap on the Disney Ranch. Sad, but that's Hollywood. The smaller, squished, anamorphic version of the Nautilus that was used for screen tests has also never, shall we say, resurfaced, although back in 2019, a fan-made replica of this anamorphic version showed up, which the auctioneers thought was real and sold for over $4,000, but unfortunately it was not used in the production of the film. I'd hate to be the guy explaining that one to his wife. But now for the good news. The gorgeous 11-foot hero prop of the Nautilus not only does still exist, but currently resides in the Disney archives, and they even sent it out for the public to enjoy as part of the D23 tour. I mean, come on, just look at this beauty. It's not only amazing that this incredible prop still exists, but that Disney cares enough for this iconic Hollywood piece to actually send it out on tour to let the people enjoy it. I'm not really sure how much refurbishing work was done on the prop, but either way, it's unbelievable to think that this model that you're looking at in all its incredible glory was constructed and filmed 70 plus years ago. Super fun. Both the wooden and fiberglass original screen-used skiffs also do still exist, and in a private collection in California. Super cool to know that these amazing pieces are still around after all these years, even though the fiberglass skiff could really use a complete restoration. Kinda cool, for 11 years, from 1955 through 1966, many of the sets that were used for the interior of the Nautilus were actually repurposed as an attraction at Disneyland called the Disneyland Walkthrough Exhibit. The wheelhouse, the chart room, the salon, complete with the actual second giant screen-used squid in the window, greeted the guests until the display space was needed for a new attraction called Monsanto's Adventures Through Inner Space, and everything was just thrown out. Really quite sad and almost tragic, but again, that's Hollywood. Some other really cool 20,000 League prop information: Captain Nemo's pipe organ was eventually redressed in 1969 and now resides in the ballroom of Disneyland's haunted freaking mansion. How cool is that? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea won 2 Oscars in 1955 for Best Art Direction and Best Film Editing. This amazing film was released on VHS, Laserdisc, and Betamax, even Selectavision, Videodisc, and multiple DVD releases, and finally a gorgeous remaster from a 4K restoration was released on Blu-ray in 2019. Now, if you want to take a really deep dive and learn even more incredible facts about this amazing piece of cinematic history, please check out the incredible Facebook group Nautilus by GOFF, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, hosted by the Volcania Volunteers and Michael Sauve. Check it out. Link in the description. Special shout out to expert model maker James Small. Definitely check out his website and Substack page all about excellence in model building. Link in the description. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was not only a significant and historic piece of cinematic history, but also remains to this day a much beloved Disney classic for the adventurous movie-going public of all ages, paving the way for other amazing adventure movies in years to come like The Last Voyage, The Lost World, Spartacus, Swiss Family Robinson, The Time Machine, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Fantastic Voyage, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive all about the Nautilus and 20,000 Leagues, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.